Yes.
Before lunch, you were giving evidence about the levels of payment for widows and dependents post-Archer.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a couple of supplemental questions to ask you about that. Is this right, that when those conversations first started out, initially the level was the level of payment was put at £12,000, and then that went up to £15,000, which we saw in the document, and then it subsequently went up to £18,000. Is that correct?
I think that's right. I wouldn't be certain of it.
And do you remember what was the basis for setting those levels at 12, 15, 18, and so on? I can't remember what it was. I can only assume that it was largely on the basis of affordability within the whole beneficiary support arrangements. Again, remembering that, better or worse, priority was always given to the primary beneficiaries. So effectively, one's looking at the pot, working out how many potential beneficiaries there are, and then working out what's affordable.
Yeah.
And
I think that's right.
And can you help us with this? Is it right that what the Macfarlane Trust was looking at was the level of household income? So if the level of household income was below 12 or 15 or 18, then the Macfarlane Trust would step in rather than the income of the individual.
They're definitely the household.
The household.
I mean, I think that is as between husband and wife, partner and partner, whatever. I don't think it would take an account of anybody else living in the household, but I think it means the combined, yes.
And why was that?
Why? Because it would be factored into the assessment of need. Would have to be.
And just picking up on a point you've just made about, again, which you've made several times in relation to the primacy, if I can put it that way, of the primary beneficiaries in terms of the Macfarlane Trust policies. Can we have, please, Shumek, MACF 5015_002. This is a minute of a Macfarlane Trust board meeting on the 19th of July 2010. And if we turn, please, to page 4. Yes, so we start, it's the National Support Services Committee is the heading. And then if we can turn, so at the bottom of the page, looking at minutes and so on, and then right at the bottom the trustees expressing concern about recommendations being made, and if we go over the page, about providing regular payments to widows, then removing them because they're not affordable could prove more damaging than not paying them in the first place. Would it be right to quadruple the income of those on very low income, and do they really need it? And talking about different areas of the country, and so on. And then the next paragraph, in response to those concerns being raised about raising widows, providing regular payments to widows, the chairman replied that the Department of Health had already agreed that of the roughly 2 million originally allocated for the support of the non-infected community, roughly half could be used for additional discretionary support for the infected community. And the chances, therefore, of having to withdraw the regular payments, presumably from the widows, were virtually non-existent since the funds came annually from the Department of Health and the policy was well within budget. So it's not in respect of the widows' policy that I ask you questions. It's in respect of the decision made by the Macfarlane Trust to use half of the funds provided by the Department of Health for the widowed community for the primary beneficiaries. So are we to understand that what you're talking about here is the roughly £2 million is the post-Archer Macfarlane Trust allocation from the Department of Health?
Yep.
And is it right to understand that initially the Department of Health was saying to the Macfarlane Trust, look, you pay the primary beneficiaries through the non-discretionary £12,800 per annum through MFET, and the £2 million allocation is for your non-infected community. Is that the way it was?
No. I think what was being said, the 12,800 didn't come actually through Macfarlane anyway, but that's correct, a distinction I know, which is not immediately relevant. What was left, the additional 2 million, was for us to spend on for our benefit of our beneficiaries. We had said, or I had said, in our discussions with the department, we said we were very anxious in the light, not least because of what Archer had said. We were very anxious to do much more, if we could, for the non-infected community. And what they were saying here, which is perhaps not very clearly expressed, is that they would have no objection. They weren't going to tell us what to do. It was always understood that it was for us to do what we thought right with the funds that we had. But if that's what we thought was right, then they would certainly not raise any issues or concerns about it. So it was half effectively. So the one half of the 2 million was, as I understand it, recall it, we were planning to use to make additional discretionary payments to the infected community, and the other half, the other $1 million, to the non-infected community.
So the wording set out here suggests that initially either the Department of Health or the Macfarlane Trust, it's not clear, had allocated that £2 million for the support of the non-infected community, and that a decision was now being made by the Macfarlane Trust with the agreement of the Department of Health that half of that could in fact be used for the infected community. Is that a fair reading?
I'm sorry, yes, that is the right way around, yeah.
So
no, I think, again, the department was never going to dictate, and the trust had not then decided how the total of 2 million was going to be divided up. There was clearly the 2 million from as far as the department is concerned, they knew and approved of us using a substantial portion of that for the non-infected community. And what we were saying is that half is what we have in mind, and they were saying, as far as we're concerned, we have no objection to that. That is really what that is saying. It's not as clear as it might be.
So to the extent that this is suggesting, or that this could be read to suggest that the Department of Health had allocated funds from that 2 million between different communities, that's not how you recall it.
Yeah, it's not how I recall it. I have to admit, or acknowledge that that's what that appears to be what is said. It appears to say that of the roughly 2 million originally allocated to the support of the non-infected community, roughly half could be used for additional discretionary support. Now,
well, that could be read as allocated by the Department of Health or the Macfarlane Trust.
Oh yeah. Well, yes, that's true. It's not very well written. I agree, but there was the allocation, as far as the department's concerned, was £2 million for discretionary purposes, and they had it in mind that we were going to use a very substantial part of that for the non-infected community. The argument that we would have made about what we were more likely to want to do is that actually what you've done in terms of implementing Archer is not adequate for the primary community. That isn't enough for all the reasons we've been through with all the numbers earlier. And so therefore we need to use some of this money, a substantial portion of it, for the infected community. And they were saying, yeah, okay, that's fine. We have no objection to that.
And can you recall whether, do you recall whether or not at any time the Macfarlane Trust internally allocated that whole budget, that whole 2 million from the Department of Health post Archer to the non-infected community?
No, I'm sure we didn't, because precisely for the reason that I've given, that we knew immediately when the government announced that it would give more money, that it was the reason why we needed more money. One of the principal reasons why we needed more money was for the benefit of our primary beneficiaries, the infected community, because what they had put on the table for them in terms of fixed payments was not what it needed to be, in our view. I think that's not very clear, I agree.
Can we now, Shimmick, have MACF 40124_066? This is a document called Draft Welfare Policy, and there is no date and no name on the policy. Can you recall?
There is a number at the top.
There's a number at the top,
which may very well relate to a minute, which
it does.
Will have that number.
Does the 08 mean 2008?
Yes, I'm pretty sure it does. Sorry, give me a moment.
Yes, I think if we look at MACF 40124_026.
There you go. July 07, I think I reckoned it was. If you look at the minutes of the board meeting of July 07, there may be a reference to it.
That's too. So if this is a minute from the 12th of June 2008.
Right.
And if we go to page 2, there is policy issues. It says 255.08, which I think is the same number. And then if you look at little 2, the draft welfare policy was noted.
Sorry, I don't know why I wrote July 07 on it. Yeah, okay. That's it.
Yeah, so we can date this at June 2008, can we?
Yeah.
So can we go back then, Shemik, to MACF 40124_066? So this is entitled Draft Welfare Policy.
Yeah.
Can you recall whether this was the policy that was more or less adopted by the trust? It may have had some changes, but
I don't know. You'll see from what the minute you referred to just now that it said that it would be presented to the board at its next meeting.
At the next meeting in July.
In July.
Yes.
This is why I should have put July 08.
Yes.
And rather than July 7 on here. And I have no reason to believe it. I think that the minute of that meeting will tell you whether it was approved in the same form. I would think it was. And as that first minute we looked at said, it would then go to the Charity Commission for their approval.
Yeah.
Or no objection, rather.
It's not terribly clear, is the answer to looking at the minutes. But it just, broadly speaking, is it a policy that looks familiar to you?
Yeah, it's what I would have expected, I think.
to see without the
around
words
that
draft
time,
on it.
yeah.
Can we then look at it in a bit of detail? So the background set out in para 1.1 and 1.2. Then we come to para 1.3. It's the view of the Charity Commission that the trust deed of the Macfarlane Trust is not concerned solely with the relief of financial need. The relief of sickness is an integral part of its purpose. It would be an extreme reading of the trust deed if the MFT were to consider itself only involved with the relief of poverty per se. The Charity Commission takes the view that need means a variety of demands that can be interpreted differently. The onus is on the trustees of the charity to apply genuine discretion, taking into account as far as possible all the circumstances that present themselves. So just pausing there, and you've already alluded to this in your evidence, but is it right to understand that the Macfarlane Trust sought the Charity Commission advice on what need meant within the trust deed?
I'll put it slightly differently. What we were looking for, we were telling them what we saw as being within our objectives and aims, permitted objectives and aims, and we wanted them to indicate that they had no objection, were concurring or whatever. We weren't asking them to tell us what need was, but it's a fine distinction. But
and then it sets out then their 1.5 what the assistance is that the Macfarlane Trust provides, and then if we could go down the page, Shemik, to 2, defining need and the public benefit test. The MFT recognises the Charity Commission guidance and consultation document, Public Benefit in the Prevention or Relief of Poverty. Go over the page. The MFT believes it meets the public benefit test when its beneficiary class is a sufficient section of the public in respect of that test. The MFT accepts the English dictionary definition of poor and then sets out what that means. And it says, in that context, the MFT regards its primary beneficiary and beneficiary cohort as poor because of their HIV infection, or where they have been affected by the HIV infection, specifically in terms of the family and dynamics arising, and that by way of the HIV infection does not enable those individuals to establish a standard of life that could be considered comfortable or normal. So pausing there, to read that all beneficiaries of the Macfarlane Trust, whether they're from the infected or the non-infected community, are being treated there as meeting the definition of poor or poverty.
on the basis described, yes.
And then it goes on to look at benchmarking need and financial relief. The MFT believes that notwithstanding the financial status of its beneficiary cohort, the term poor can be applied because all beneficiaries are prevented from living a life that is comfortable or normal. And then the MFT fully accepts that need is a relative term and relief may depend on an individual's own financial circumstances. So are we to understand that, meaning that all beneficiaries are in need, irrespective of their financial circumstances, in need within the meaning of charity law?
Yes, because that is picking up the medical health issues.
And then Section 4, the definition of financial need. So then here we have where a primary beneficiary or beneficiary has a household income of less than 60% of the UK median income, and then the definition of financial need is set out, giving benchmarks and so on through Section 4, recognising that HIV is a lifelong condition which will have a progressive detrimental effect on an individual and a wider but similar effect on the family household. And then we come to, if we go over the page, please, Section 5, the disbursement of relief to address need by way of regular payments. The MFT recognises that the entire beneficiary cohort is poor by virtue of the statements contained earlier, and the MFT seeks the mode of monthly regular payments as the core mode of disbursement to address poverty and meet the definition of poor as stated. And in that context, the disbursement of regular monthly payments should be constructed to address that fact and definition that all beneficiaries are poor, but equally accepts that different financial circumstances should apply. So, is this definition, was this definition of need, as identified here, as being a wide definition that encompasses more than simply financial need, was that something that was accepted as the relevant definition for the Macfarlane Trust to apply when considering applications from the beneficiary population?
Yes, I think that's right. I think need always comes back to financial need. The question is what brings you to that point, and what we had always said, and the Charity Commission agreed, is that financial needs are created, additional financial needs are created by, in this context, lack of health, and in that sense, because they have additional needs of that kind, then they come within our ambit, and we can satisfy ourselves that we are doing the right thing in terms of relieving need in the context of the Oxford English Dictionary definition of poverty.
Is it actually right that everything comes back to financial matters? I mean, suppose someone is writhing in pain. What they need can't be relieved by money. It does require treatment. Treatment may cost money, but I don't think it comes back to money, does it?
I'm not sure I'm drawing that distinction. I think,
or someone who needs comfort.
In order, the only apart we do provide non-financial assistance as well, but our primary purpose was to relieve need, however caused, by providing financial support, and the financial support was, for example, different level was providing the additional money to compensate, that's the right word, for additional heating bills that people who suffered from, those who suffered from HIV were going to incur, because of that is, their condition was what was creating the extra financial demand, and we were providing resources to meet that demand, that financial demand.
Yes, well, I shan't comment further at the moment. It just at the moment it appears to me that this definition of need and poor in the sense of leading a poor life as opposed to being financially short is a very wide definition, and doesn't necessarily bring you back to money. The money can solve quite a number of problems, but it can't, for instance, of its own, easily resolve stigma, which may be suffering.
No.
Or, for that matter, the cold shouldering which some people may have suffered as a result of their condition.
Well, anybody who owned up to it, as it were, did suffer from it.
And that might need addressing by other means, such as providing, as you did, providing for people to have the society one of another.
Oh, yes.
But those are the points that I just had in mind when you said what you said.
Okay, all right. Okay, fine.
And it did strike me that you can push finance as an answer to everything, but it isn't necessarily. I mean, someone who's had a road traffic accident and is injured on the footpath requires the services of the ambulance.
Yeah.
It doesn't require money.
No, that's true, but equally we had to justify the payments of money that we were expending.
Yes.
And that is what these definitions were working hard to encompass.
But they were resolving need on a very broad basis, I think is just the point.
Yes, well, I accept that, yeah.
So would you accept this, that on the basis of this definition of need accepted by the Macfarlane Trust, that the Macfarlane Trust could treat all the beneficiaries as being in need without any requirement to look further into that by way of financial assessment or otherwise in order to comply with charity law. The fact that they may want to carry out financial assessments in order to decide how to distribute funds is another matter, but in order to comply with charity law, the McFarlane Trust...
Prima facie, yes.
And does this follow from that that the McFarlane trustees could have, if they had wanted to, distributed the funds, the reserves, the whole fund amongst the beneficiary cohort on that basis? Because the starting position is everybody is in need, and therefore we can meet the need.
No, everybody is in need, but you've still got to define the extent of the need. And we could not, on that basis, have simply dispersed all of the funds to everybody equally. As I said earlier this morning, that is not relieving anything. It's just paying a dividend. So, no, we could not have done that. We had to establish a need, a financial need, in order to be able to do that. And which is why there were a very few cases where people were determined enough, and possibly fortunate enough, to earn substantial incomes, who did not, despite prima facie qualifying, did not then become entitled under our policies and arrangements to payments.
But would you accept that those beneficiaries who were not in financial need, would you accept it wouldn't have been a breach of charity law or the trust deed to have provided them with funds because they are in need within the meaning of this definition? Whether you would want to provide them with funds, given there are limited funds and you want to share it out fairly, is a different matter. But could you have done that? Do you accept you could have done that without breaching the trust deed or the charity law?
I don't think I do, no. I agree, 5.1 appears to suggest that but certainly, as I say, it meets the definition of poor in the sense that there is a prima facie qualification, but you can't stop there. You've then got to work, you've got to assess what the financial needs, and there may be other needs that we can also satisfy through non-financial support, but in order to qualify for financial support, then we have to take into account the financial circumstances or assumed financial circumstances to some extent of the beneficiaries.
And just looking then at the detail of how financial need is benchmarked here, can you tell us anything about, do you recall anything about how those figures were chosen, where they came from?
The truthful answer is that no, I can't recall specifically. My sense is that the Charity Commission's guidelines were of assistance in this regard, in terms of defining poverty. But where exactly that 60% came from, whether it came from the Charity Commission or from an assessment of, but there were stages, mainly before my time, I think, when advice was taken from people in the charitable sector, consultants in the charitable sector. I can't remember whether that was first actuarial, it might have been. But certainly some assistance was obtained from people like that. And so that, no, I can't add to that, really.
Can we look now then at how need was assessed as a matter of practice, can we look at AHOH 40101? This is a McFarlane Trust personal census form, and if we go to the last page of that, to the bottom, you see copyright McFarlane Trust 2009. Is this a document that you recognise from existing at around the time you were at McFarlane Trust?
I didn't remember it until you asked me to have a look at it the other day, and I saw it and thought, well, yes, I have seen that before, yeah.
Can we go back to the first page, please? So it begins by saying that this is a confidential for use by McFarlane Trust only, designed to make sure we have your correct details and to make sure you're receiving the correct amount of regular payments. Please make sure you complete the census form and return it within 4 weeks of receipt. If we do not receive the census form within 4 weeks of dispatch, we will assume that only the lowest level of regular monthly payment will be paid. So we looked at those two levels earlier, but all beneficiaries, all infected beneficiaries in any event, were entitled to receive. And then if we go over to page 1, please. We can see there that it asks for personal details, asks further down the page who bottom half of the page, who the beneficiary lives with, whether they own their own home, etc., and those arrangements. And then over the over onto the next page, just the family details, who their family are, partners, children, and so on. And then over onto the next page, employment and income details. So you set out your status, your employment status, all the allowances and benefits you have, and then further down the page, if you're in receipt of income support, please provide evidence. And then you have to say yes or no to whether or not your incomes exceed your outgoings exceed your income. And if you're on income support, if you're not on income support, you set out your net income per annum, and if you have children living with you contributing financially to the household, what their contribution is. Is it fair to assume that from that the household income in fact includes income provided by children?
It would certainly be taken into account. Whether it literally counts towards those levels that we were talking about earlier, I don't remember, to be honest. But it was certainly something that the Trust felt it needed to be aware of.
And then if we go on to the next page, part 4, we see that children's details are put in there, ages, whether they live with you, and then at the bottom there, information about whether or not they're in full-time or higher education. And then the last page, which we've already looked at, simply allows a space for other information in the signature. So was this the basis upon which the McFarlane Trust, was this the way in which the McFarlane Trust assessed the financial need of those that were receiving regular payments?
It was the starting point. It was the starting point, yeah, and then this was the means by which the Trust tried to keep up-to-date information about all its beneficiaries, yes.
And do you know how frequently these had to be filled in? Was it annually?
No, I don't think so. No, I think this was produced at a particular time. If I remember from the last page of this, it's 2009. So I think don't know whether I don't think it can have been produced at the time of the following the Archer report and the need to re-establish information after that, or whether it was another example of the census form being sent out. But I'm sure it wasn't sent out every year. I say I'm sure. I have no recollection of it being sent out every year. These, unfortunately, are questions which Mr. Martin Harvey would have been very quick to be able to respond to, and I'm afraid I can't.
And one more question on regular payments. It's MACF 5023 _002. This is a note of a meeting on the 24th of January 2011 of the Board of Trustees. And can we go to the bottom of that page, please? Implications for the Macfarlane Trust of a statement by the Secretary of State for Health on the 10th of January 2010. If we turn over the page, we see what that is. If we go to where it says the second bullet point, stage 2 co-infectees will receive both the $12,800 per annum paid by MEFT on a non-discretionary basis to MFT and ET beneficiaries, and the new $12,800 per annum to be paid to those who have received or will receive stage 2 Skipton payments, together an additional £25,000. So that was the announcement. Is that right?
I think that's what. Yeah. That's what we picked up.
And then, if we can turn forward to page 6, please, of this note, which is the bit I wanted to ask you about. The first bullet point, the chairman believed that the new non-discretionary payment of £12,800 per annum for Skipton Stage 2 recipients will have to be taken into account when considering the qualification for any MFT top-up discretionary payments. However, the proposed change to the objects clause to permit the medical consequences of beneficiaries' conditions to be addressed separately from their financial circumstances might provide scope for some additional relief to be provided in appropriate cases. So what seems to be suggested here is that once those co-infected beneficiaries who will be receiving both a Skipton Stage 2 annual payment and the MFET payment would not qualify for the discretionary top-up payment from the Macfarlane Trust, but might qualify for single payments. Yeah. Is that what?
I think yes, I believe that's what that is saying. I think as you say, these were, and as it says there, these were to be top-up payments, and a top-up to provide further financial support. And if we were taking into account the 12,800 received from MFET for that purpose, I couldn't see how we would not have to take into account the further 12,800 received, the same beneficiary would receive from Skipton, even though it wasn't from MFT. But yes, I think that the second sentence is referring to the possibility of making additional grants, notwithstanding.
Can we then just turn back to the welfare policy just to look at how single payments were dealt with? It is MACF 40124 _066. And Shamit, can we turn to page 5 of this document? Section 6 sets out single grants. Single grants would not be available under the current Office guidelines to those primary beneficiaries with household incomes greater than £41,000 per annum, but can be applied for and would be subject to the discretion of trustees. An application form giving financial circumstances would be required. So that's suggesting that all applications for single grants from a household with an income of more than £41,000 would have to come to the trustees, and would also have to provide an application form giving financial circumstances. Is that what you would call the policy to be? Yeah. Where a primary beneficiary has a household income that lays within benchmark 1 or 2 requirement, and that is defined earlier on in the policy at page 3, halfway down the page, further, just 1 household incomes of less than 60% of median income plus 20%, and 2 of more than 80% of the median income but less than the full value of the median income. So we go back again to page 5. So those are the households paragraph 6.2 of this policy is considering, where a primary beneficiary has a household income that lays within benchmark 1 or 2, the requirement that an application form for a grant be completed will not be deemed necessary. Was that because by virtue of being within those cohorts, the category of financial need is established?
Yeah, that's my understanding, yeah.
And then paragraph 6.3, where a primary beneficiary has a household income that's within benchmark 3, an application form will be necessary, giving financial circumstances would be required. This is to establish whether or not the requirement could be satisfied from own resources. So for some categories of beneficiary, financial need would need to be established. Yeah. And that's done by a financial circumstances, a household, a financial, an application form setting out financial circumstances. Yeah. Do you know, or are you aware of any guidelines or written guidelines that helped trustees to apply to work out, faced with one of these forms, how you work out whether or not there is financial need or not?
Well, I think the reference to a form, I think, may not be helping us here, because I'm sure there would have been a basic form, and then the application itself would have said, I need help with this because. And so the NSSC in the first instance, actually it would be the NSSC, unless there was an appeal or a request for a referral up, would assess that, the combination of those two things, and the likelihood and the reasonableness of a request to say, because of this, that, and the other, I need financial help with this. My financial circumstances are here, but my current circumstances, or whatever is giving rise to this request or application, is the following. So there'd be the statement or the application would be in 2 parts: a form and if you like, a personal statement. That's how I recall it would have been done.
I'm going to move on to a different topic now. Shamik, can we have MACF 5018_0104? Now, this is a minute of a meeting in October 2007, but I don't want to ask you about that minute. The document I want to ask you about was provided to the inquiry as part of a number of documents. I don't know why particularly it's attached to this minute, but can we go to page 9 of this document? And this is what I wanted to ask you about. It's a letter dated the 26th of September 2007 from Dave White, Head of Fraud Investigation Services at the Jobs Centre. And it says, issue the McFarlane Trust payments and other disregarded sources of income, timing immediate. And it says, following recent ministerial correspondence with the Chief Executive of the Macfarlane Trust, in which concerns were raised over the treatment of beneficiaries of the Trust, please alert all investigators to the need to consider Macfarlane Trust payments and other disregarded sources of income when carrying out the evidence-gathering stage of an investigation or during an interview under caution. So are we to understand that this is a memo sent out by the head of Fraud Investigation Services at the Job Centre Plus to investigators in relation to the issue of monies received by beneficiaries of the Macfarlane Trust, and alerting them to the fact that those payments should be disregarded as sources of income when looking to see whether or not there's been fraud from somebody who's claiming benefits.
Yeah.
Can we turn over to
And we also said, I recall, that we sent messages to the communities directly to say if you get called in to be interrogated, or whatever the right word would be, or if you know you're going to be, then and if you want any help, just be in touch with us, and we will make sure not only that we brief you properly, but also that if you've got any issues with these people, you let us know straight away, because then we can go round the circle and make sure that what should be done is done.
So this was an issue, was it, that was being raised by beneficiaries to the Macfarlane Trust?
I think we spotted it. I mean, it was it's something that I don't recall it coming from. It might have done. It might have easily have been something raised by the user trustees on the board. But I would have expected the Chief Executive to have been on top of this already. Quite why it came up in this context, I now can't remember. I think it is referred to in the paper somewhere, but I can't remember exactly where it was.
And the problem was it that beneficiaries who had received monies from the Macfarlane Trust who were on benefits were being investigated for fraud because they had monies in their accounts that were showing up that couldn't possibly have come from their benefits, and so they were being investigated for fraud.
That's the context, yes.
And
but it was literally an investigation. Well, I suppose it said it's the fraud investigation department, but it was certainly. Wasn't there a new? I'm not going to remember this well enough. I want to say that there was a new system that was brought in, which was designed to. Reduce the scale of government benefit payments, and that new system involved, among other things, having this sort of unit set up, and we were aware of that. I think we raised it with the department as well, but I'm not going to be 100% sure. But yes, that was certainly taken up proactively by us, yeah.
And then if we turn over the page to the next page on this letter, it says there that sets out the payments that should be disregarded, and then payments from these organisations may be identifiable at the evidence-gathering stage of an investigation. However, if the source of the capital payment is not identifiable, the customer may be invited to attend an IUC, interview under caution, presumably. Mm-hmm. If during the interview the customer identifies the source of the payments as being from one of the above organisations, investigators should be sensitive in their questioning and limit their questions to the source of the payments and the amounts in payment. Mm-hmm. And if the payments relate to Macfarlane Trust, then all inquiries should be directed to the Macfarlane Trust. Mm-hmm. Do you have any knowledge or any recollection about whether or not the sending out of this letter made any difference to the amount of beneficiaries that were interviewed under caution?
No. In short, I believe it did. I believe this exercise was considered to be very important for the benefit of our beneficiaries, because they were bound to be, or some of them were bound to be, examined as to their financial circumstances. Whether the letter picked up in the minds of the potential interrogators this possibility straight away, I don't know, but that would probably have required the person being examined to volunteer at the outset what the source of the income, the cash, the assets that person had to volunteer the source of it in advance to the interrogators. And I don't know how often they were able to do that, or whether it only actually came up in interview. But I was certainly made aware that there were plenty of circumstances where this was invoked.
And then there is, I don't necessarily, I will take you to the document if it's helpful, but there's a report in a minute of a trustee meeting on the 21st of January 2008, where there's a report from the chief executive having a recent meeting. So I think this must be this meeting with the head of fraud. Do you recall whether or not you were involved in that meeting with Dave?
No, I wouldn't.
Right, you wouldn't have attended that meeting. And there's a subsequent meeting in September 2008 with the DWP in which you weren't involved. But
No.
We've got Mr. Neil Bateman,
Yeah.
the benefits advisor, who was involved at the behest of McFarlane in those meetings, and we can ask him. We can direct those questions to him.
No, he was very much involved in that.
Can we? I'm moving now to another topic. It's MACF 40124 _ 074. This is a note of an NSSC meeting on the 7th of May 2008.
Mm-hmm.
And under matters arising, the paper considered by the Board of Trustees at their meeting on the 21st of April, having been referred back to the committee and now recirculated with the agenda was considered. The committee reviewed the schedule of ex gratia capital payments made to the beneficiaries of the McFarlane Trust and compared them to those made available to beneficiaries of the Eileen Trust. For the most part, the committee noted that where the MSPT payment, that's the unrestricted capital payment of £20,000 made to all haemophiliacs infected with the HIV virus by way of contaminated NHS blood products, was added to the value of the MSPT2 payment, that being the second ex gratia capital payment that was made subject to signing a waiver where the amounts depended on the age and family status of the claimant. The aggregate value of the ex gratia payments was similar in value. The committee noted that the areas where discrepancies or matters of concern could be identified were A, the MFT infected intimates were included in those that qualified, were not included, I beg your pardon, for those qualified for the MSPT payment of £20,000, with the result that an MFT single adult female beneficiary received £23,500, whereas a similar category of beneficiary from the Eileen Trust received £43,500. The Eileen Trust beneficiaries were directly infected by NHS blood products through treatment. We go over the.
Can't
I
do
think
one
we're on
too
the wrong.
far.
I think we need to go back a page.
Back one. Back two.
Back two, I think now. Back to page 2. Yes. Oh, you've only got 3 pages. So page 2 doesn't seem to be loaded onto the system. Let me read it out.
Yes. Is it one of those documents where something which was a 2-sided original has been photocopied or scanned?
It may have been.
Side?
So let me go back to where we were and see if we can do it by me reading it.
Take it slowly.
Yeah. So we've established that that there's a difference of effectively £20,000 between the McFarlane Trust female beneficiary and the Eileen Trust female beneficiary. The Eileen Trust beneficiaries were directly infected by NHS blood products through treatment.
People are watching at home, so,
Yes.
so take it steady.
The MFT female primary beneficiaries were infected indirectly. This distinction is a matter of fact, but is likely that the MFT cohort will not appreciate this distinction, as they will regard the core route of infection, whether direct or indirect, as by the NHS. So, pausing there, can you recall how or why the Macfarlane Trust Board were considering this matter of unequal capital payments made to certain categories of beneficiaries back in 1991 at a board meeting in 2008?
The answer is no, without going back to the 21st of April.
If you don't recall, you don't recall.
No, I don't. I mean, it was I tell you what I do recall, which is where it became relevant, but it wouldn't have been in 2000. I don't think. Actually, might have been. This was to do with the suggestion that the two trusts should be merged.
Yes, that's where I was going to take you next.
That's the context in which I remember this distinction being drawn.
So let me then take you to that document. Then, if we go then to MACF 5012_131. This is a document we've already looked at today. It's the minute of the meeting between the Department of Health and Macfarlane Trust on the 28th of October 2008. Mm-hmm. If we go to the last page of that minute, under any other business-related matters, Christopher referred to the option of a merger between the Macfarlane Trust and the Eileen Trust, and this was still the Department of Health's preferred option, although Brian acknowledged the arguments put forward by the Eileen Trust regarding loss of their own identity if a merger is to take place. And then there's a number of reasons put forward as to why it would not be practically possible to do with the administration and moving and so on. And then towards the bottom of the 2/3 of the way through that paragraph, Christopher added that the major stumbling block to the possible merger would be money and the inequalities that exist between the two trusts. If the Department of Health were to fund the equalisation of payments to beneficiaries, including that of the capital payments made in the late 80s, early 90s, and the merger did not cost the trust anything, then he would be happy to try and influence the other trustees and the beneficiary community. Brian said that the Eileen Trust needs to provide DH with all sums of the merger. He added the merger might be more cost effective than buying out the Eileen Trust. So is that what you were referring to? That's what you recall?
That's when I remember it coming up. Well, I don't know. What was the date of this meeting?
So that meeting is 28th of October 1998.
2008.
Sorry, 2008. Beg your pardon.
Whereas the previous.
The previous was
May.
May
April.
2008.
Yeah. So no, I don't know. I don't know in what context that first. I don't recall in what context that first reference to this point was made.
And then one last document on this point for asking a question, which is MACF 5012_015.
That point was the difference in capital payments for the female primary beneficiaries was a long-running sore. So we were very conscious of it whenever.
That was something that beneficiaries were bringing to the Macfarlane Trust.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, the female ones particularly.
Yeah. So the last document I wanted to look on this issue is this one. It's headed Implementation of the Government's Response to the Archer Report, Funding of the Macfarlane and Eileen Trust. Do you recognise this document? Is this a document you think you've seen before it being provided to you for the inquiry?
No, I don't recognise it.
Do you think it's a Macfarlane Trust document?
Let me have a look, if I may. This looks like a department document to me.
It's the last.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, I don't know. It's got a reference at the top right-hand corner, 430.09.
Which would suggest that it did get to the trust, even if it was prepared by the department. It got to the trust and is referred to in a board minute.
So that's a board minute reference, is it?
That's what I would expect it to be. I don't know. I can't remember whether the NSSC had references like that for their business. I can't remember.
Well, we can always check that, but it's
definitely not. I'm sure it's not a trust document, no.
So it's the penultimate box on the left-hand side. Decision or rule we've got on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
And then Department of Health rationale on the right-hand side.
Oh, yes, this is definitely not from the trust.
No. Well, and then the penultimate box on the bottom, no equalisation of MFT
exactly.
and ET lump sum payment.
Yeah.
And so that seems to be the decision that's been made. And the rationale appears to be the two trust lump sum provisions are strictly equal already as between the sexes. No action needed.
Yeah.
So, first of all, can you recall the Department of Health informing you that they had made a decision that they weren't going to equalise payments?
No, I can't. But as you can see, it became... Well, no, yes, indeed I can, because, of course, what we were looking at just now was at the end of 2008, and this is 2009.
So it appears that this is a decision...
It has been a running issue, and so... and I'm trying to remember now the rationale that what we were looking at a few minutes ago was showing the trust's recognition in the sense of understanding that what the department said. The department had said that they were treated equally because our female primary beneficiaries had not been infected by... Their condition was not as a result of infected blood, to which our beneficiaries said that is a difference without a distinction. That's the point that's being made.
Yes.
So that's why I say strictly equal, that it says strictly equal, with the strictly underlined.
So the question I asked is whether or not you could recall this decision being communicated to the trust, and I think your answer to that was no.
I mean, I don't remember it being, communicated in the sense of some written statement addressed to us. I don't remember that, but it was certainly, we were certainly aware and made aware that was their position, and it remained their position when we come to the subject, both in 2008 and again, I think after Archer. Of the possibility of merging the two trusts. And we consistently made the point that that's not going to work unless you do something about this issue, and they were still saying, but, you're not comparing like with like.
You're comparing, so that's what you understand, that's the rationale.
Yeah.
You understand that you're comparing apples with pears, effectively.
That's what they were saying, and we're saying we're certainly not.
And so
we compare the outcomes, not the immediate cause.
And so I think it's clear from what you've just told us that issue was never resolved during your time at the Macfarlane Trust.
Never was, as far as I'm aware.
So those are the questions that I wanted to ask.
Yes. Well, you want to break, do you?
Yes, please, for call participants to submit their questions.
Yes. This purpose of this break, Mr. FitzGerald, is to allow those who are core participants, representative core participants who are watching, to put forward any questions which they
understand,
may have for
Yeah.
you. Well, there are quite likely to be a number ranging over a variety of subjects. But
I
we'll
will
come
do my
back
best.
in half an hour, so 25 to 4,
Okay,
and deal with such questions as there are.
fine.